Before we dive into the hottest news topics, if you love Flash Drive, make sure you're following us on Spotify and Apple to know as soon as any new content drops.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
It's the monumental news that has pushed everything else from the headlines. Queen Elizabeth II, a constant figure in the world for 7 decades, has died. And with it, Britain and indeed Australia ushers in a new era with a new monarch, King Charles III.
I shall endeavour to serve you with loyalty, respect and love.
And with a new sovereign comes the inevitable question: is it time for us to stop having an Englishman as an Australian head of state? Plus,
this means so much. Thank you so much.
It's TV's big night. We'll discuss all the winners from the Emmy Awards and our recommendations on what you should be watching right now. I'm James Law. Welcome to Flash Drive. And welcome back, friend of the pod and news.com.au deputy editor, Liz Burke. Thanks for coming back, Liz.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Now, I just read a scandalous story on news.com.au today that Coca-Cola has decided to discontinue selling Lift in Australia. What?
Well, I mean, this is what I assumed you were talking about when you said the monumental news that's pushed everything from the headlines.
Right?
It has. It's been huge today. So, yeah, rumours have been swirling for apparently a few months. We've confirmed it today. No more Lift. It's going to be Sprite plus lemon flavour.
See, not into that.
Not that catchy either.
No. But I guess it'll pretty much be Lift, but they're just rebranding it, or is it a different flavour?
Apparently it's the same flavour. Apparently it tastes more similar to Solo, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's got caffeine in it though. Bit weird. Very different product.
Don't need that.
No.
I love a
wouldn't have
Lift.
thought so.
I'm a big fan, like a Solo. I mean, you'd go for a Solo
Exactly.
first. But,
Exactly.
you know, in those Coca-Cola vending machines, I go for a Lift a lot.
Yeah. And if it depends on the vendor as well. Like you want to have the option. If they don't have Solo, I'm going to get Lift.
Yeah.
So now, like if they don't have Solo, I'm not going to get Sprite plus lemon flavour, no sugar.
And caffeine.
It's not catching on.
Nah, it's not happening. Coca-Cola, have a good hard look at yourself.
Big mistake.
Bring back Lift. We could do it. Like, we have that power.
We could try. Is that where we want to invest our power?
Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's probably bigger issues. One of which was, of course, the big story of the last week. It's the news that we kind of knew was coming, but that didn't stop it still coming as a shock to a lot of Australians and, of course, those all around the world. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest-serving monarch, has died, ushering in a new era with King Charles III as our new sovereign.
We have some very important news.
We interrupt regular programming.
We have got some breaking news. Buckingham Palace has just announced
The death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
The moment many people never really imagined would happen has now happened.
The quiet woman who dedicated her life to service and duty.
The palace has just issued this statement.
The Queen died peacefully, the royal family says, at Balmoral this afternoon.
She passed away at her home at Balmoral Castle in Scotland.
The only leader in place since the end of World War II.
The King and the Queen Consort.
A reference there to Charles, he automatically becomes king.
It's a tragic piece of news. Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. Buckingham Palace has confirmed this piece of news.
Queen Elizabeth of the United Kingdom and the British Commonwealth has passed away.
The most photographed woman on the planet.
She was 96 years old.
May she rest in eternal peace.
Liz, tell me, where were you when you heard the news?
Well, I think I'll go back to before the news actually broke. It was the statement that came out in the night that said that, you know, she was under medical supervision, she was unwell, doctors were really concerned about her. I think that came out at about, it was about 9:30 at night. I was just about to go to bed. That's actually quite a late night for me. So unusual that I stayed up for it, must have known something. But yeah, that was just so unusual. It didn't, suggest necessarily that she was dying, but it was just so strange. So the moment that statement came out, our newsroom kind of woke up from whatever they were doing, and we all jumped online, we all logged on, and yeah, it kind of went from there. But yeah, I think I went to bed at about maybe 1:30, got a couple of hours sleep, and then woke up and got back to it to spread the word to our readers.
Yeah, and look, same for me. I knew that was unusual. And so for us, I got a call from my boss at 3:30 a.m., which is right when the news broke. And luckily she was overseas and awake. So I would have been fast asleep. But luckily she called and I was like, okay, I'm up. I know what to do. And in we went. And, I think, she was 96. But I still feel like, I feel like probably like a lot of Aussies where she sort of feels like your kind of surrogate nan.
Exactly. And she's been around forever. Like
Forever.
the thing I think was, what was the stat that came out on the day? It was something like, only 14% of Australians or something like that were even around before she was queen. So, very few of us have that memory of her not being around, not being the head of state, not being, this ethereal kind of celebrity that we don't really know too much about, apart from that, she's a lovely old lady.
Yeah.
So it was definitely expected, but it still came as a shock.
Yeah, I think so.
Even those photos from just 2 days before, she looked fine. She looked great. She was happy. She was smiling. She was shaking hands. We knew that she had mobility issues, they kept saying along the way, but show me a 96-year-old who doesn't.
Yeah, and she was still beaming in those photos with Liz Truss.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so sad. And I mean, how do you feel about the Queen? You like the royals, don't you?
Yeah. I do. I think I'm definitely not a monarchist. I don't know that I'd consider myself a royalist, but I kind of appreciate their role. I began my career in journalism at the Australian Women's Weekly, where royals was sort of, bread and butter. So I, kind of learnt the value of that and the interest in them pretty early on. But yeah, I think they do play quite an important role when it comes to, fundraising and things and, charity work and all of that in the UK. They do, I guess, inspire some people across the world, some leadership. I don't think they have a very sort of practical role like that much to most people in Australia. But I think there's not really another celebrity or like super well-known person that so many people would know and recognize. So I think no matter kind of what you think of her, what you think of the family, so significant.
Yeah, 100%. And it's weird for us because, like you say, we've never seen this changing of the guard before in our lifetimes. And so it was interesting about how when the statement came out that she died, automatically it said the king is there.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the thing. It's like as soon as she dies, he becomes the king automatically. That sort of, I remember going to write a headline like him to be sworn in as king was like, who's swearing him in? No, it's his birthright.
Yeah.
He is the king.
Yeah, it's not like any other, institution or anything that we have.
No, it just happens.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting. What do you think about King Charles III? What do you think he will be like as the new sovereign?
It's so interesting to me to see what he is like, because I don't think there's any way to tell. I don't think his sort of behaviour up to this point, like as the Prince of Wales, which he's basically been for his whole life, is any indication of how he will act as the monarch, because they're meant to be, so impartial, so sort of silent. They kind of not really meant to influence anything. And he has famously been a meddler. So, loves his political issues, like most well-known, loves his environmental issues. I think it was not that long ago, well, maybe a decade or so ago now, when all of his secret letters came out. I think they were called the Black Spider memos, like because of his scrawl, his inky scrawl that you saw. He's writing all these little personal notes to ministers, prime ministers, British politicians, lobbying on all of these issues, which is a massive no-no for royals. Even was a no-no for him in his role as the Prince of Wales, but for the monarch, for the king, that's, completely unheard of. But then again, we haven't had another person in this role for 70 years. The world's changed so much. And who's going to tell him how to do it or how not to do it?
Well, perhaps the example of his mother.
Yeah.
And she was very strongly staying out of all political issues pretty much throughout her whole reign. So, and in his speech, he did seem to imply that he would be dropping some of these causes.
Yeah.
He sort of said something along the lines of that these issues that I've been passionate about, I'll have to pass over to other people. So I get the impression that he will probably have to stay silent on things.
Yeah, I think it's most likely that he does. But yeah, you kind of just, I guess, curious to see what creeps in, what little flickers of character we get from him. Because we did from the Queen, sometimes we saw not political issues, not really personal opinions, but you did see, occasionally little glimmers of personality come through. So it'll be interesting to see how that, kind of manifests in Charles.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think that a lot of even her family members have said that she's relaxed a little bit in the latter years of her life.
Yeah.
And tried to show a bit more of a sense of humour and a bit more levity, which I like that.
Yeah, and we kind of know him reasonably well. He's given interviews, he's shared quite a lot, whereas with the Queen, we never really got that because she was in this, this really private, really silent role for her entire life. So, yeah, I don't think we'll be getting more from him now, but it's just, I think, a very different, a very different person to have in that role.
Yeah, and even though his subjects have had a bit of a different opinion about him throughout the years. I think a lot of people were off him after his divorce with Diana and some of the ways that she was treated. But I get the sense now that that's been forgiven and that the public is ready to embrace him as the new king. Do you think so?
Definitely. Even only in the past few days, I think the tide has turned a little bit. So initially it was all, about the shock, about the Queen, about, I don't think people were kind of ready to think about King Charles. And this has only happened in a number of days. And then all of the focus was on the younger royals, on, Harry, Meghan, Kate, what they're doing. But we have one of our news.com.au reporters, Bronte Coy in London, and she, hit the streets yesterday to ask people what they thought of Charles. And she noticed that even more so than the sentiment had been a couple of days ago, it seemed very positive. And these are people in London. They're going to be more sympathetic towards the royal family. There's a lot of people who have travelled specifically to see him, to see the proceedings that are going on in the next couple of days. But yeah, from those reports, from what we're kind of hearing on the ground over there, it certainly seems to have been like a bit of a embrace has kind of come over the area in the last maybe 48 hours or so.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the same reception in Australia. There's strong rumours that he's going to visit here sooner rather than later to sort of solidify his new role. So it'll be, I would expect that he'll be embraced in much the same way here.
Yeah, I'd say so.
We'll see.
I guess it's exciting. You don't see a king that often.
Still weird to think of him on the back of the coins and that with his wingnut ears. We'll see. Look forward to that.
It's so strange. But so, I mean, that kind of brings his role into focus a bit more now, doesn't it? So, I mean, what do you think of Australians thinking of him now? Like, he's literally the king of Australia. I mean, isn't it weird that we still have a foreigner, an Englishman, as our head of state?
It is pretty weird. And the idea that there is a king or queen of Australia is kind of absurd. And, this has been the question that's been put to the Prime Minister, is it time for us to consider a republic again? He's put that off the table. He thinks that the most important thing we need to be focused on constitutionally is the voice to Parliament. So he's put it down the path a fair way, probably until after he's re-elected. But for me, the Republican question is really interesting. I agree it's absurd that the royals are our heads of state. But throughout the Republican argument, which has been going on in Australia for decades, I'm yet to be presented with a model that makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, the proposal is that we would, through some quite structured way, we'd have a few candidates going up for president of Australia? That sounds as weird to me as king of Australia.
Exactly. It's bizarre.
It's weird. And then what do? You end up voting in a sports person or something who we like a lot, who we have a lot of affection for, to have this same kind of ceremonial role as the Governor General. To me, that feels like as empty a symbol as the royals are, potentially even more empty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even it would make even less sense.
Yeah, and I think it kind of also pays a bit too much to the role of the royal family now. So, I mean, I feel like if we got rid of them, if we got rid of that connection, it doesn't have to change anything in Australia. So could we not just still have a prime minister, still have the same sort of voting system, still have the same sort of system of government that we've inherited from that institution, but just carry it on without having to, the Queen or the King give assent to our laws? I don't know.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because that's kind of how it works now.
Yeah.
But it would leave like a big gaping hole in the center of us as a nation, because it's like, well, who's the boss?
Yeah, that's true. That's
they were
true.
like, I don't know, because there's this weird circular thing where like the Governor General can dismiss the government, but the government can dismiss the Governor General. So it's like it's this weird thing with the way that our constitution works.
Yeah.
But I think that this is the problem with the Republican movement is I get the argument, right? We shouldn't have English people as the boss of the country.
Yeah.
But what's the replacement model?
Exactly.
I've never
That's what we don't
never
know.
been convinced by any of them, like, to really get behind it. And I feel like Australians are largely apathetic about this, don't you reckon?
So, well, I guess without getting into those details, what do you reckon would happen if we had the vote? If we had the vote today, next week?
I think if you had it next week, it would go down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there would need to be a lot of work because last time there was one, they came up with a model and people rejected it, mostly because there wasn't enough kind of, the general punter didn't have enough say.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of work to do to get the model up, to convince people why that's the best model. Yeah, I think it would go down in flames if they had it tomorrow. People aren't exercised about it. They're not fired up about it.
Exactly.
And until, if Charles oversteps or makes a blunder, then that might help the cause. But for now, I'm just surprised that the Republicans haven't been able to make the argument.
Yeah. And you probably wouldn't want to have it next week. You'd maybe want to leave a bit of breathing space, not immediately after everyone's remembered how much they love this lovely queen and are celebrating the royals.
Yeah, maybe give Charlie a couple of months to get his feet under the desk. Liz, the other thing about all of this is that we're going to get a public holiday. I think it's Thursday, September 22.
Yeah.
Albo's spoken to all the premiers and chief ministers. They've all agreed. We get the day off.
Hooray.
But straight away though, there was a lot of people who, well, I don't know how many people, but Albo had to answer about, well, hang on, this isn't fair to people who have elective surgery on that day or have to get childcare or have to pay penalty rates. Since when in Australia did we get cranky about having a day off?
Yeah. I feel like this is kind of the... I don't know, the class system sort of creeping through. Like overall, yes, Australians love a public holiday. There are people who would be cranky about it, but those people are, business owners, doctors, people who have to pay penalty rates. It's not really the everyman, but I guess those are the people who, maybe have a bit more of a voice and are able to lobby the government on an issue like this a bit more. I get it. It's annoying, but give people a day off.
I want a day off.
It's all we want.
Yeah, and I'm going to spend the whole day thinking about the Queen. I won't be at the pub.
Well, it is a day of mourning.
I will be, I'll
You're
don
not going to
black.
take the piss with it.
No. I'll just be thinking about her the whole time, okay?
Yeah.
Thinking of
yes,
England.
boss.
Remember, Flash Drivers, if you're loving the podcast, let us know. Subscribe and leave 5-star reviews. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Everyone needs to be across the news of the week. Besides the death of the Queen, the other thing that's really caught the attention this week was the reunion between Prince William, Kate, Harry and Meghan Markle. So after the Queen's death, they all came out and did a very public walkabout at Windsor Castle, looking at the flowers, speaking to some of the mourners. So obviously these two couples have been estranged in recent months since Harry and Meghan ditched their royal duties and hightailed it to California. And, they trashed the royal family a couple of times on the way out. Liz, what did you make of it? Were you happy to see the Fab Four back together?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool, and it was, sort of unexpected. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm a massive, Meghan and Harry fan after the whole Megxit situation. Probably more of a Kate fan. I think that's just, she's kind of been around for the duration that I've kind of been reporting on the royals. I think it's just kind of, it's nice to see them all together. It's, it kind of reminds you of their role in, the rehabilitation of the royal family over the past few years. Like they've given them a lot of fans. It's kind of been all about the young royals, for the past almost decade, I'd say. It was cool to see them back together. It was really cool that it was, that it was unexpected. And there's just been so much bad blood, so much, politics in that little foursome over the past couple of years. So, yeah, it's a nice little symbol, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not overstating it to say that Harry and William were really estranged, right?
That's what, sort of all of the reporting suggests. And those kind of rumours don't come out of nowhere. And this is a pretty powerful family that can, put to rest some issues that they don't like having around, and they haven't. And I think, and now it's kind of emerged since then that William played a big role in orchestrating that event. He didn't want to do it on his own. He wanted his brother there with him. And, it's a family event. It's a family occasion, and a death in the family does bring people closer together. It's kind of what happens. It's something that, a lot of us have or will experience, that, coming together of family, burying old arguments and things when something like that happens. I think it was really nice that they could be together for that, especially considering, all of the really sad events that they've kind of put on a similar show for. I think it was nice. It was significant.
And do you think it was just for the cameras, or do you think that there is a reconciliation going on behind the palace doors as well?
So hard to say. I mean, a lot of what they do is for the cameras. Like, that's a big part of their job. They're basically just kind of public-facing, like, figureheads, really, that there's not really that much more that they practically do.
Yeah.
But they could have easily not done it too. So I think it is sort of a step forward.
And I feel like there's been a few significant olive branches extended.
Yeah.
So when Charles gave his speech soon after the Queen's death, his address to the nation and the world, he did kind of acknowledge Harry and Meghan and say, as they create a new life overseas.
Yeah.
And then I saw that Harry kind of returned the favour in his statement when he, paid special respects to his father as the new king. That felt like conciliatory.
Yeah, I think so. And it's important to remember as well that it's not just a rift. Like, this isn't just a family argument. It's not just, sort of like tabloid fodder arguments that have been going on between these individuals. Like, these guys literally, they quit the family business, which is pretty significant, and it's a massive thing. And it was it's something that's never really happened before. It was a massive historical event, and it had all of these ramifications. I think it's important to remember that it's not kind of just like a silly argument that they're fighting over. Like, it's really significant, practical stuff.
Yeah. And potentially something that could have inflamed things even worse is Meghan Markle's recent public comments. Yeah. So she's been all over the place in the weeks before the Queen's death. She launched a new podcast. She had a very eyebrow-raising interview with The Cut as well.
Extremely.
Have a listen. Yeah, extremely. We'll get into it. Have a listen to a bit of what she had to say in her podcast.
So I don't ever remember personally feeling the negative connotation behind the word ambitious until I started dating my now husband. And apparently ambition is a terrible, terrible thing. For a woman, that is, according to some. This morning, I was saying to Harry, I said, do you remember one of those...
I'm the one, for the record.
I was about to say, when they said, Harry's girl is straight out of Compton. I was like, are they talking about Serena? I'm not from. I'm like,
that's my
exactly.
guy, you know?
You love a redhead. I'm like, I'm not from Compton. I've never lived in Compton. My mom doesn't live in Compton. But by the way, what's wrong with Compton?
Before we get into the specifics, Liz, do you think that Meghan, I feel like Meghan's trying to correct the record on some of these discussions and try to, in some ways, rehabilitate her reputation. It's fair to say in the UK there's a lot of people who look down on her and think that she's trashed the royal family. Do you think that these recent public pronouncements have helped her?
I guess they have with certain, segments with certain audiences. But I don't think any of them have helped as much as, that photo opportunity on Saturday. So as much as it's a really devastating event for the family, these picture opportunities with her together, especially with Kate and William, I think have done more to rehabilitate her reputation than, any of the campaigns, any of the podcasts and magazine interviews that she could have possibly done, because it's kind of giving her relevance. I mean, the reason that she is who she is, the reason that she's famous is because she was part of the royal family. And without that, I think where Meghan and Harry have sort of fallen down since Megxit is that they haven't really established who they are outside of that. They've said, we've got a podcast, we're starting a Netflix series, but why? But what are you doing? Like, what's the end game? What's the objective? Like, who are you trying to present yourself as? And so kind of bringing them back into the fold a bit, I think has, reminded people who Meghan is, why they kind of liked her in the first place. And then, when her podcast gets back up and running, because I understand they've paused the release of this week's episode, which is totally fair enough.
Yeah.
Then, I feel like that's going to have a strong impact, and it'll be good for her.
Yeah. We need to talk about this bit in the cut interview, which just is crazy. I'm just going to read this little bit from the interview. So this is in the journalist's voice. Though she has been media trained and then royal media trained and sometimes converses like she has a tiny bachelor producer in her brain directing what she says. At one point in our conversation, instead of answering a question, she will suggest how I might transcribe the noises she's making. Quote Meghan, "She's making these guttural sounds and I can't quite articulate what she's feeling in that moment because she has no word for it. She's just moaning."
Oh my God.
I mean, what the hell? You must have lapped up that interview.
I loved it. I loved that line. But why is she moaning?
I don't know.
And then why is she commentating her own moaning?
What the hell?
It's just so bizarre. It's giving David Brent in The Office.
Brent Muse.
Yeah, exactly.
So much.
Yeah, talking to the journalist, telling him how to write the article. It's so cringy. I want the director's cut of this interview.
Yeah.
Because I reckon, I don't know if they had, if Meghan had copy approval or anything like that, but you'd have to imagine that it's quite tightly managed. I think the journalist has done such a fantastic job of, straddling that line between not making it. They're not taking the mickey or anything, but it does give you that little bit of insight. You can read between the lines that it's a little bit of an unusual situation.
The journo knew what they were doing because
exactly.
Then they turned the sort of it around into making her like a girl boss kind of thing. But it was clearly that's ridiculous.
That moment is just insane. And I think it might be, a bit inside baseball, but we were talking about it in our newsroom. Imagine coming back into work from that interview. You'd just be like, guys.
I've got the quote. Yeah.
It's so
crazy.
good.
One thing about Meghan that an observation about her that I've made after these podcasts and this interview is I feel like she fundamentally misunderstands the institution she's married into.
It seems that way. That's the impression that she's giving.
Yeah, because a lot of her podcast is about trying to talk about, I'm a well-educated woman. I'm an ambitious woman. I want to speak my mind. I want to fight for the causes I believe in. That's great. And as a Hollywood star, 100% you should do that. As a woman, you should do that. Go nuts. But you married into one of the most conservative institutions in the world. She should have known that, you can't be the normal ambitious activist that you were.
Yeah.
You've got to play by the rules.
That's right. And it's not just taking on, it's not just marrying someone, it's taking on a job, like a number of jobs. As the Duchess of Sussex, as the wife to the person who's, was at the time fourth in line to the throne. Like, she should have known what she was getting into.
Yeah, but I still don't think she gets it.
Yeah, it's very strange. Or if she does get it, she's making out that she doesn't, which is even more strange.
Or she's just rejecting it, which is fine, but you can't be angry at the firm.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to change.
Exactly.
You're going to have to.
Yeah. And an American person from like completely outside the game is not going to be the person to change the royal family from within or without.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll look out for her podcasts when they resume, maybe in a couple of months. Yep. Love hearing us analyse the biggest and smallest headlines each week? Make sure you follow us on the socials so you don't miss any content. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok and YouTube. Get on it. Liz, at the time of the recording, the Emmys have just wrapped up in LA. Let me run you through some of the big winners. The HBO dramedy The White Lotus cleaned up, including winning Best Limited Series, Outstanding Supporting Actress for the iconic Jennifer Coolidge, and Best Supporting Actor for Aussie actor Murray Bartlett. I thought this one was a great show. Did you see it?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, that was a winner over the was it over summer? I think it came out, but yeah. I think that's very much a deserving winner. What do you sort of remember from that show?
It was, I remember there's no character that you like. It's
yeah, in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically an ensemble of really awful rich people who are awful to each other. I guess kind of in the way that Succession is a little bit. Maybe that's sort of a trend at the moment. But yeah, it was great. It was, it was addictive. I think it was like quite a short series as well. So you didn't feel like you were roped into it too much. But yeah, no, it was funny. It was good.
Yeah, that's a good one. Some other winners. Zendaya won her second Emmy for her role in Euphoria.
Yeah, good show.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen that one. That one seems a bit full on for me.
It is. It's kind of up and down. It has some really fun moments and some really dark moments.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd recommend.
Ted Lasso cleaned up in the comedy categories. And also, you mentioned it before, we need to talk about Succession. For me, that was definitely the best show of the past 12 months. It won Best Drama Series, Best Supporting Actor for Matthew McFadyen, although the Aussie actor Sarah Snook was rudely snubbed in her category. But Succession, it's a winner, right? I imagine you've lapped that up.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good, and I can't wait for more. I actually found this whole awards ceremony really personally self-affirming, because I find that like after the Oscars or something, I'm always going, never seen any of those movies, don't know too much about it. But this, I'm like, yes, I watched the correct shows.
Oh, me too. Yeah, except for Euphoria, I've seen these. I think Succession's brilliant, and like you say, I can't wait for more. For people who haven't seen it, it's like probably the blackest of comedies. Really, it's a drama, but it's hilarious, right? Again, so mean to each other.
Yeah.
Just the insults they throw at each other is like golden.
It's so good. It's just so good. And there are some really just unique characters. It's a bit disappointing that Sarah Snook didn't get in there. She's so good in that show.
Yeah. Well, okay, here's a question. When you watch Succession, who do you root for?
Ooh. Do you root for anyone? I mean, I like Roman.
Yeah, you like Roman.
Yeah, he's
you got
fun.
a soft spot for him.
Yeah.
Because I kind of go for Sarah Snook's character, Shiv.
Yeah.
Like, she's the one, like, she's flawed, but I want her to succeed.
That's the thing. I think I want her to succeed, but she just keeps making all these mistakes. So I'm like, girl.
She's awful.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. A lot of people who watch Succession have said to me like, I watched the first few and couldn't really get into it. I recommend you persevere.
Yeah. Great soundtrack too.
The music is stirring. Yeah. Is there anything else you're watching right now? Any other shows that maybe aren't on the Emmy list that you'd recommend?
I just finished watching The Bear.
I was so glad you said that because that was going to be my reco.
Yeah.
It's the best, right?
So good. So much tension. But I think what got me in was the 27-minute episodes. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you whip through them. It was almost that's totally recommend. So that show is about a chef who is working in his brother's sandwich shop in Chicago. And it's just got a great cast, like you say, really tense, but also really funny.
Yeah.
And you'll whip through it so fast. Real rock and roll show. Great soundtrack again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh, we're in alignment,
We're in
Liz.
sync.
I love it. And I should give a plug to Flash's sister streaming service, Binge, because a lot of these shows we've been discussing are there on Binge, including The White Lotus, Euphoria, and Succession. So if you're not on Binge, you should sign up and watch them there.
Yeah, they've got the right shows.
They really do.
So now's the time in the show where we talk about what's coming up on Flash. What would you recommend, J.Law?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of good content about the Queen on Flash. We've got a wealth of documentaries and things looking back on her life, including a really nice documentary about her love affair with Philip, as well as just things looking back at her life from her childhood, where she was never expected to become queen at all the way through to some of the scandals she's had to endure as queen. So I'd recommend you have a look at all of those. And also I should mention that on Monday night at 8 p.m. we will have live rolling coverage of the Queen's funeral, which will obviously be of high interest to everyone across the world. So tune in from 8 p.m. on Monday.
We'll be there.
Another thing I just wanted to mention is last week in the podcast, we spoke to Sky News host Erin Molan about her new documentary, Haters Online, Erin Molan Fights Back. Now, it was meant to air on Tuesday, but it got pushed back due to the rolling coverage of the Queen's death. So we'll let you know when that show is back on air once it's been announced. Liz, thank you so much for your time and all your insights on the Queen. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah. See you next time.
Okay, bye. If you enjoy the news and this podcast and want to learn more about Flash, you can sign up at flashnews.com.au. Flash lets you stream more than 25 news channels in one place. New customers get 14 days free. Start your streaming today.